There was a lot of talk yesterday about donors as obstacles. In fact, I hope everyone noticed the symbolism of taking the chairs from behind the table and bringing it down close to the people. We're really very, very nice. Over the last few months, it's been interesting. Every time I'm in a group of donors, I hear ABCD. And I thought, this is amazing. This is a breakthrough. This is really a fundamental shift. Then I discovered that ABCD didn't stand for asset-based community development. It stood for asset-backed commercial paper disaster, which is one of the things I'm going to talk about briefly at the end. But let me just say a few words, because I think really all I can say is a coda to what we've already heard from Bria and Jim and Sebastian. And you know when someone says that, it doesn't mean they're not going to repeat all of that. But change is messy, and both sides have to change. Yes, donors are an obstacle to using the ABCD approach. And there's a reason they're an obstacle. I've found that usually when things persist, when habits persist, it's because it's convenient for people. And in this case, it's not just convenient for donors, it's convenient for the people who are asking for money. It's what I call the dance of deception. Community organizations pretend that if they just had the money, they could solve the problem. And donors pretend they believe them. Or if you wanted to flip it around, donors pretend that the most important ingredient to any change process is money. And the organizations that are looking for money pretend that that's true. In fact, of course, it's an elaborate deception which is convenient for both sides. It's convenient for both sides because it puts money at the center of the relationship. And it's not easy, it's not friendly, but at least you know where people stand. It's convenient because it makes accountability appear so much more straightforward. The accountability follows the money. Being accountable to the community is actually difficult. Being accountable to the donor is actually easy. Or at least it seems easy. And it's convenient because it suggests that the process we're involved in, a process of change, is simple, straightforward. We can actually map it out. We can call it a project. We can treat it as a transaction, when we all know that it's actually extraordinarily complex, requires flexibility, change, learning on both sides. So it's an arrangement which seems to suit people. How do we change it? We've just had examples, 3 examples, of what the potential is when that change takes place. It doesn't necessarily make it easier, and I think the fascinating lessons we've just heard is how much more productive, how much more creative people are when we stop this dance of deception. How do you stop it? Well, first of all, as we've just heard, both sides have to engage in stopping the pretense. Honesty actually is quite contagious. It's too bad it isn't tried more often. But honesty means accepting that we're engaged in a process that we can't predict in advance. We can't set it out as a blueprint for change. We can't pretend that budgets can be drawn up and strictly adhered to. It requires that, in a sense, be negotiated. That people face the fact that both sides need each other. It's true that people working in the community need financial resources. That's just one of the things they need, but it's important. But it's equally true that donors need to give their money to somebody. That's acknowledged less often. And what's more, it's a highly competitive process. As you know, once something is classified as a success, everybody wants to fund it. Nobody wants to fund it until it's classified as a success. So everybody's anxious to brand whatever appears to work as being the result of their efforts. or in the case of donors, of their funding, their grants. So part of this honesty is accepting the fact that while one side needs money, the other side needs people who are asking for money and using it productively. And it is a competitive process. It's also a matter of focusing not so much on what is the purpose of a grant, but what is the issue that we're trying to address together. Once you forget that, or once you drop the pretense that what we're doing is funding the application of a solution, and see it much more as a process, a joint process of inquiry into finding an approach that is going to work, that's going to be effective, you actually change the relationship from one of you are responsible to us for doing what you said you would do, to we are together trying to find answers to very complex and difficult problems. And we both have something to contribute to that search. What you have, of course, is the passion, the local knowledge, the contacts, the ability to engage the community, none of which most donors can do. What donors have is not actually just the money, but certainly in the case of foundations, they have patience. They don't have to demonstrate results immediately. They have flexibility. They have a capacity to learn, if that's what they see themselves doing. By combining the strengths and assets of both sides, you actually have a much greater chance of a successful outcome. But as I say, it starts by recognizing that this is a common concern. It's not a responsibility only of the community organization. So it's establishing a much more collaborative relationship that's key to this. And while you may think that community organizations are in a weak position to try to establish the ground rules for a relationship which respects what both sides have to contribute, I would contend that is not true. What the donors have been able to do is to maintain the illusion very successfully that they have all the power because they have all the money. But we know that money is not the solution. And what follows from that is donors' power is illusory. But it's up to community organizations to stand together to say that. I think Jim gave us a very good example of what happens when you're dealing with government and you see your power as being citizens. It changes the nature of the relationship. So, as I say, this is really just a coda to what we've just heard. Change is messy, requires many different forms of contribution, and the starting point is a recognition that people who have been encouraged to view themselves in a subordinate position, in the position of asking, actually have to recognize, no, they're not asking, they're offering. They're offering to collaborate on achieving something important for everybody. Just to end, to go back for a moment to the ABCD, asset-backed commercial paper disaster, one of the things I've noticed in the last 6 to 9 months is, and it's a very positive outcome, is that because so many foundations and so many donors, for that matter, have seen an incredible implosion of their assets, people are beginning to be much more realistic about looking to see, well, what else have we got to offer? If we can't offer money, or at least if we can't offer the kind of money we might have had a year ago, are there other ways that we can be of use? And therefore, they're beginning to ask, how important are the non-financial assets that we might have as donors? What about our knowledge? What about the contacts that we can provide? What about our ability to bring people together, to learn from each other? What about the ways in which we can leverage our endowments? Perhaps not make grants if we don't have the grants budget we used to have, but at least provide through much more creative ways of using our endowment to guarantee loans or to make whatever model might emerge, and there's a lot of creative thinking going on now about what people are referring to as social finance or other ways of using the financial resources more creatively than just by making grants. So there are some glimmers of change, but I think the first thing is a recognition, as we've seen in the 3 examples we heard earlier, that it all starts not by saying it's their fault, not blaming, as Jim said, but accepting that responsibility is shared because these arrangements, in a deep sense, are dysfunctional, but they're also convenient. And we have to break that fiction and recognize that both sides need the other if we're to be able to serve the community effectively.